In the fall of 2014, PolitiFact's publisher Nick Acocella convinced Governor Tom Kean to join him in shooting a pilot episode for a new kind of talk show.
Everybody up and rolling? Yes. Governor Tom Kean, welcome to Pasta and Politics with Nick Acocella. We're going to squeeze them.
Yeah, squeeze them. What do you mean squeeze them?
The premise, Nick cooking a recipe with a politician while discussing New Jersey politics.
I've never chopped garlic before, but that's what I'm going to ask you to do while I put some...
First time.
First time? Well, there we go. Here we go. People are going to be very, very happy with you in the future.
Yeah.
We're going to make a cook out of you.
Most people don't even let me have a knife.
Yeah.
For Hoboken's Nick Acocella, pasta and politics was the combination of two great passions: political deals and cooking great meals.
Basil on it and eccola. I think we are finished.
Over the course of 26 episodes, Nick provided many of his guests a rare opportunity to talk about their personal journeys through the world of politics.
Beautiful.
Great. And the problem is that whichever way you choose, half of the Italian grandmothers in America are going to be mad at you.
All we need is to sway one, so we get 51%.
Spoken like a speaker.
All the old timers talk about the days when they would fight on the floor and then go over to Lorenzo's and have dinner and settle all the problems.
Discussing political history over dinner was in fact a guiding principle of the show.
You break bread, it's harder to say no.
Funding provided by PSE&G, committed to providing safe, reliable energy, now and in the future. NJM Insurance Group, serving the insurance needs of residences and businesses for more than 100 years. And by Fairview Insurance Agency, family operated for over 50 years, with locations in Verona and Cherry Hill.
Pine nuts? There's a big debate whether to call them pinoli or pignoli. So I resolved it by calling them pine nuts, because you don't want to offend anybody.
Okay.
I've been around politicians a long time.
As the publisher of the weekly newsletter PolitiFacts, Nick Acocella regularly met with political insiders on both sides of the aisle. The trust he'd cultivated with New Jersey's politicians made the very idea of pasta and politics work.
You've been able to go everywhere in the state. Spared the nonsense in Trent.
You said it, I did.
I certainly did. I make my living talking about that nonsense.
Nick's love of political history was always tempered by a sense of humor, by the notion that politics and politicians shouldn't be taken too seriously.
And went to philosophy. My mother said, "What are you going to do? You're going to sit and think. Nobody hires you to sit and think." She was right. But
Well, the Senate.
no, that's sit and talk.
Oh, sit and talk, right. There's not a lot of
Yeah.
thinking going on.
Yeah.
Nick's passing in 2020 has certainly left New Jersey without one of its dependably smart and funny political voices.
Maybe not even a cook, I just played one on TV.
This collection of stories and conversations from Pasta and Politics is a tribute to Nick's personal take on what's right and what's wrong with politics. We're doing something I've long been tempted to do. We're talking to my friend Nick Acocella, editor and publisher of PolitiFacts New Jersey and host of Pasta and Politics with Nick Acocella on NJTV, about himself, his work, and what he affectionately calls this thing of ours, meaning New Jersey politics. So when did you veer into New Jersey politics, and how?
When you're born in Hudson County, you don't veer into politics. You're born with it. It's in the blood. While you're a speaker, you take on perhaps the second most obstreperous group of people in New Jersey politics, the Hudson County Democrats. You become the chairman of the Hudson County Democratic Committee.
Right. I said I'm sort of like the quarterback. I put everybody together in the room, and you know what? It's about giving everybody respect. You know Hudson County. We're both Hudson County boys.
We're Hudson County guys.
County is about mayors.
That's all it's about.
Mayors are supreme.
I always compare it to the Holy Roman Empire. Whoever the emperor is has no power. It's all the kings who elect the emperor. So the county executive in some places is the most powerful guy in the county.
That's right.
That's not true in Hudson County. He's a consensus candidate. For years, there were people who are suspicious of each other, at war with each other.
Right.
And so you're saying by putting them in a room and letting them air their differences, it's better to do it in a room than in public.
It's just about sometimes it's perception. In war, you don't get anything accomplished. When you're at peace,
you just spend money.
That's right. And who makes the money? The consultants.
The consultants, that's right. How did you get into politics?
I left the news, and the very next day, I had a call from Washington, from the Republicans in Washington, suggesting that I consider running for higher office. And I said, let me have some time to breathe before I even think about that. George Norcross called me and said, we'd really like you to run for office. And Glenn Paulson called me, said, we'd really like you to run for office. Glenn, of course, the head of the Republicans in Burlington County, George at the time, the head of the Democrats in Camden County. And I took that as meaning I had done a really good job of being unbiased. So they did not know what party I really belonged to. I'm a fiscal conservative. There's just no way I could be a Democrat. And so I ran as a Republican.
But we're recruited by both parties. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. How did you get into this business and why?
You know, Nick,
I don't mean cooking, I mean politics.
I never dreamed of doing any of this. I'm an iron worker by trade, and I've actually climbed on buildings and worked on bridges. And in 1993, my wife had a baby, premature, 2 pounds. And we were in a neonatal unit for 75 days, and halfway through we found out she had Down syndrome. I really didn't even realize what Down syndrome was. And it's embarrassing to admit that, but I didn't know. But, you know, I didn't like the way people with disabilities were treated. So people complain all the time about, well, if you don't like it, do something about it. I did. You know, some people asked me to run for office. Democrats first, Republicans second. I'm a Democrat. I ran for Freeholder.
Freehold, right.
And when I won my election, the first thing we did was build schools for kids with special needs.
Without hyperbole, I will tell you, when I put my suit on in the morning to go to Trenton, I say I am a gladiator going to fight. This is my job. When I first came into the assembly, I was extremely insecure. I had a speech impediment. I just had a...
This is something I find hard to believe.
I'm telling you, shy, reserved. And I used to write out my speeches in longhand, stand on the floor, and tried to pull myself out of that shyness. Yeah. And got there. And then somehow I just kind of developed a sense of calm as I stood on the floor.
That is not anything anybody in the press corps would ever associate you with.
Here's what I say, Nick. There are 120 legislators, right? It's the most gifted place to be. When I go down and I see the Golden Dome, I really get goosebumps. If you're not excited and jacked up when you're there, then get out, because 1,000 people want to get behind you.
Yes.
I was a senior in high school, in a public high school in Union City. I was told because of my grades and activities I could be in the senior honors program, but I had to come up with $200 for the books. My parents were poor. We lived in a tenement. I didn't have $200 for the books. And I couldn't understand for the life of me, if I had the ability and the grades and not the money, that I'd be barred from being in the honors program.
In a public school?
In a public school.
Wow.
So I created such a ruckus that they gave me the books, told me to shut up, and put me in the honors program. But I didn't feel right, because I had friends who had the ability, the grades, and not the money, but unlike me, didn't say anything and didn't get in. So the next year when I graduated, went to St. Peter's College, first in my family to go to college, I started a petition drive to change the school board and move it from an appointed one by the mayor to an elected one. Got thousands of signatures, put the referendum on the ballot with a group of my friends, passed the referendum at 19, and then at 20, ran for the first school board election in my hometown.
That's astounding. Yeah. That's really astounding. I did a little bit of research. You were the only member of the Senate who has served at every level of government, from Board of Education to the United States Senate. You're absolutely unique there. I have a lot of time on my hands, and that's why I do things like that. I asked around for people to describe in one phrase Leonard Lance. The one that comes up most often is civility. The second one that comes up is policy wonk. And the third one that comes up is fiscal conservative.
I think all three are a great honor, and I hope to be able to live up to all three.
Good.
I favor civility in political life. I may agree or disagree with someone else's point of view, but I don't think we should criticize the motives of those with whom we may disagree.
Yeah, good point.
I clerked, and I was also the law librarian, and the freeholders of Warren County paid me for that year of service $11,000. So yes, I'm a fiscal conservative.
What made you go into politics?
I didn't know what to do. As a matter of fact, my mother accused me of going to law school to avoid working for a living.
Okay.
And she was right.
She's right, yeah.
I had no idea what I wanted to do. So my mom talked to me, who was involved in politics as a committee woman. Oh, yeah, she was a committee woman.
Okay.
Talked me into going to a Democratic club meeting. Thought it was a good idea. Maybe I could meet some girls at the time, you know. I was single. And I went, and Adam Levin was running for Congress.
Wow.
And he was a dynamic speaker.
Yeah, I remember him.
And I caught the bug. I worked on his campaign. He never got to Congress. Yeah. 2 years later, I was in the legislature.
Okay, so your mother was responsible for this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
When I ran for office the first time, she advised me, for your campaign, all you need is 5 good women. Forget about the guys. The women get things done.
They do the work.
They do the work. The guys sit around and say, well, here's what you should do.
In Hudson County, we was going pocket warmers. They'd walk around the headquarters like this. Well, here's what we got to do next.
Right.
But never the hands came out.
Yeah.
We know the story about how, when you were a kid, you volunteered for Governor Kane's campaign. But when you were 20 years old, when you were a big man on campus at the University of Delaware, did you see yourself as the governor of New Jersey someday?
No. I mean, I thought about politics as something that I might want to do. When I was 20, what I was really focused on was getting to law school and becoming a trial lawyer. And I thought, if someday that led to politics, right, then that'd be interesting. But it was not what I was thinking about at 20.
Not what you were thinking about at the time.
Even though I was in student government and I enjoyed that stuff, but it wasn't translating in that way, and certainly not to this job.
For someone who came from a relatively privileged middle-class background, you did something very bizarre. You moved into Brick Towers,
right,
which was not exactly a middle-class privileged area.
I always say I got my BA from Stanford, but my PhD from the streets of Newark, because some amazing, heroic people who inspired me and taught me and took me under their wing. One of them was a woman who was a tenant president of those buildings since the year I was born, 1969, and her name was Miss Virginia Jones. She so put me in my place and sort of breaking me down in many ways and building me back up. And when she and others sort of encouraged me to run for city council, she says, one thing, a lot of these politicians will get elected and forget where they come from. I want you to stay rooted in the community. I said, I'll only stay rooted in the community, but I'll move into those buildings. And she was sort of surprised. And I kept my promise to her. I got elected to the city council. Months later, I moved into Brick Towers, and she and I and a whole bunch of other amazing, mostly women, mostly older African-American women, or these were heroes. I learned so much from them because these folks were on the front lines of the fight for the American dream, this idea that this nation can't be real for anyone until it's real for everyone.
How did you get into this business?
Politics?
Yeah, you started very, very young.
Yeah, well, my uncle was mayor of Scotch Plains.
I didn't know that.
Because they were Republicans, I was a Republican. I didn't think much of it. I was a little local lawyer, municipal prosecutor. Somebody approached me because I had these roots in Scotch Plains and a lot of relatives, a million relatives, and you want to run for the assembly. I had no idea what was getting into, as you can imagine. I had no idea what I was getting into. And I said, I don't know, you want me to run? Yeah, okay, I win.
You never had held any
No, I never ran for anything before. Too many relatives,
They never appointed
too many
to
conflicts.
a board, never...
It was too soon. I was municipal prosecutor. It was too soon. I was only 30. That's how I got into it, and once you're in, as you know, it's hard to get out.
It's very hard to get out.
It's very hard to get out.
Although we know people who've gotten out by going to jail. How did you get involved in politics?
So actually, I was recruited. Like we had the Step Up program for the Democratic State Committee when I was the vice chair, and what we find is that women often wait to be asked to run for public office, and that was my case. From there, I met George Norcross and Speaker Roberts. They saw something in me. They knew my passion and love for Camden and afforded me an opportunity to run for public office.
You ran for mayor. Now, what brought you to the realization that you should be mayor of a city with serious problems?
Sure. Well, Camden was always my passion. Camden was the reason why I got involved in politics in the first place. Aside from being asked, my father always believed that Camden was going to come back and told our family never to leave the city. And so I believe that, and I'm so honored to play a role in Camden's revitalization. But to your question, I was asked to come back and run for mayor.
You were. Your father was the governor, your grandfather was a congressman, you were descended from, Peter Stuyvesant and everybody else. Was there pressure on you to join, in effect, the family business?
Not at all. There was pressure from my mom and my dad to give back. So whether I was a volunteer firefighter or an EMT,
and you did that.
I did do that. You always had to give back, And mom and dad were always very strong about that. You know, history is important. All of our families' histories are extraordinarily important because it's what built this country and built the next generation. You know, my grandfather used to say, you know, it's important that you're proud of your ancestors, but it's also important that they would be proud of you.
You were part of that grandfathered group that could hold 2 offices.
Yes, I was.
So while you were a freeholder, you ran for city council.
Correct.
And were elected there twice.
As a matter of fact, I was elected to the city council the same year I was sworn in for freeholder. So I had only been a freeholder for 4 months when I ran for city council.
Okay. I never disapproved of dual job holding. I think it works.
Right. Well, if you're going to do the job.
Part-time jobs.
And my argument about it was, it wasn't anything that I was appointed to or given, or I had to put myself out before the elected.
You still live in Newark?
All my life, same street.
Same street?
Same street. 3 generations of my family on the same street.
South Ward?
South Ward. 4 blocks from the hospital I was born in.
Good thing you went to Washington, otherwise you wouldn't get very far. You wouldn't be going very far.
I tell people our big move was from 14 to 19.
Wow.
Across the street.
Wow.
That was major after 30 years.
So what happens when you get a liberal arts degree? You have to create your own career.
I know well.
So that's what I did. I started off doing screen printing and embroidery. The town was not, at the time, not treating business owners great. So I became president of the town's Business Owners Association.
Got it.
It's like a
like a chamber of commerce?
Yeah, a local chamber. And we made some really positive changes, and I got addicted. I saw that, you know, at the local level, you can actually get things done if you organize.
And the company's still going strong?
Yeah, actually better now that I'm not there. So.
When I was a kid, I'm the youngest by 8 years. So Mother took me with her to everything. So I would get to stay up late on election night because we had paper ballots back in those days.
I remember.
And we'd go up and she'd count, and I got to go to conventions and all sorts of things like that. So I kind of grew up, and I also was the one at the dining room table when they were talking about issues of the day, whether it was local or state or national. And I majored in international government in college, actually. Did a bunch of things in Washington, went out to Colorado, lived out there for about 4 months doing a campaign.
What brought you back to your native state?
You know, New Jersey's always been home. I live on the farm on which I grew up.
Yes, that's the right answer. Nobody wants to stay in Washington.
No, that's not the real world.
No, it's really
they
not.
think it is. They think it's the center of the
people
real world,
who live there think that they are the only world.
That's true. That's true.
My dad's a union teamster. He was, God bless him, was a union teamster. So, and I grew up in that environment. My grandmother worked as a cleaning lady and helped organize all the cleaning ladies in these buildings in Philadelphia. So the labor movement, organized labor, is sort of embedded in me. My parents were like, well, maybe you need to think of doing something else. Get an internship. And thankfully, I got one in the old Assembly Democratic office under a dear leader, Joe Doria, who I count as a mentor and role model as well, and had an opportunity to work in there as an intern. Someone remembered me when my predecessor, Silman Jack Connors, and my current running mate, Silman Conaway, won their election. And they said, hey, there's this kid from Willenboro, would probably be a good legislative aide. The rest is history.
That's how you started, as an aide to Connors and Conaway.
That is how I started.
So you were a legislative aide to the guy who's now your district partner.
Yeah, exactly right.
You've lived through the arc of New Jersey politics now 40 years. How has it changed?
It's changed a lot. Now the danger someone like me has, you know, it's very easy for us old guys to say, look how wonderful it was in those days. And that we shouldn't do. But it was better. I mean, it really was better.
That said, yes.
Yeah, that said it was better. And better in these ways. We got along a lot better. I mean, Brendan Byrne and I first became close friends. Brendan's one of my closest friends.
Yes.
Brendan and I became friends when I was a Republican leader in the legislature, and he was a Democratic governor. The bottom line was, what's better for New Jersey? And you had that kind of legislator who may be conservative, maybe liberal, but on certain issues that were very important to the state, they would come and they'd vote their conscience.
Oh boy, that smells nice. So we got to pull the burnt skin off.
So you like cooking?
I like cooking. I like cooking for guests. I don't do the ordinary kind of cooking. I like applause. Now we're going to do the thing that was always magic in my house when I was growing up. We're going to dump the pasta in the water. It was a ritual when you got old enough to do it. It was a big deal.
Sunday night was always like pasta night.
Yeah.
And so Mom would cook during the day. She would cook the gravy during the day, and then we would have pasta together. You know,
I like that you call it gravy.
Yeah, well, that's
of course that's what it is.
Sure, that's what it is. I mean, you know, other people call it sauce.
Sauce or sugo for the really effective.
Yeah, no. It was gravy in our house. When a Sicilian woman is making it, it's gravy.
It's gravy. You're absolutely right. After that cooks, we're going to sit down and eat. The only spectator sport that rivals New Jersey politics is baseball. And it's a natural fit. New Jersey, we are a single political community. What happens in Camden County reverberates in Bergen County. Yeah, those are the two great spectator sports.
Some of these issues that were campaign issues when I first started,
Still
school,
there.
finance, Mount Laurel, housing, economic competitiveness,
in the 20 years I've been
etc.
doing this,
And we don't fix the problem.
we're still talking about the same things. We're talking about property taxes. We're talking about the same things.
I am
Let me ask
I am
you
disappointed that I served in an era where I think there was some general frustration. I served with some giants. I served in some legislatively prolific times, but there are times we don't meet for months at a time.
Right.
You know, some people are happy with that. They think everything is safer when the legislature is not in session. But there are some in-basket items that just make sense to deal with.
I always know I'm going to see your name in the papers once a year at least. At the end of every summer, sand comes. And you're the genius at getting sand dumped back on the Jersey Shore. What do you have to do to get them to deliver all that sand?
There are a lot of people in the Congress and almost every president who, regardless of political party, Nick, who think that that should be something the state and the towns do, and the federal government shouldn't pay for it. But the state and the towns can't afford to pay for it. It's too expensive. And the federal government has to come in after a disaster and pay for all the help and relief.
It's like preventive medicine.
Exactly. This is not pork. This is important not only for this storm, but to prevent future damage.
Of course. You are the first lieutenant governor in the history of New Jersey. We've never had, maybe we've had one in colonial times, I don't know. But certainly not under the 1947 Constitution. What's a lieutenant governor? What's the job description?
Well, you know, in 2005, they voted to make the office effective 2009, and the legislation really doesn't say.
Exactly. It doesn't say what it is. It could be anything.
All it says is you cannot be the Attorney General.
But there's nothing in the law that says it has to be economic development or has to be Secretary of State.
Doesn't say anything. Doesn't say a word.
Would it work in
You
your
don't even have
opinion,
to
if-
come to work.
Exactly.
And you don't even get paid. You know, that's the fun part about this job. I do not get paid. There's no salary set aside for lieutenant governor.
Oh, you only get paid as Secretary of State.
Correct. Yeah, that was a fundamental
well,
flaw.
That's hysterical.
Yeah, the husband liked that a lot.
How do you define being state chairman of the Republican Party? You said something in a newspaper article that I thought was absolutely on target. You said it's half cheerleader, half pessimist. Is that accurate?
No, I think that's 100% true. I mean, if I had to figure out the three main components, I think number one, obviously, you got to be able to raise money. Number two, you need to be able to build and promote your brand. And number three is you got to be able to build a bench and get your teammates elected. So, it's about getting Republicans elected to office. So that's what we've been doing. Since I took over really a three-pronged approach. It's been rebuilding, rebranding, and re-engaging.
So when the Cape May Republicans have a fundraiser,
that's a great trip to make when you got to be there for an 8 o'clock breakfast.
Yeah, right.
You leave Warren County at 4:30 in the morning.
I was going to say I would go the night before because I don't do 4:30 in the morning. When you took the speakership,
Yes.
you wanted to be thorough and thoughtful.
Yes.
Explain.
What we get to do is a remarkable thing, right? We get to make the rules for 9 million people.
Yeah.
You have an obligation, I think, to understand what it is that you're doing, what's the impact, and why. And you ought to be able to answer those questions to people.
Instead of representing X number of thousand people in one district, you see yourself as representing all 9 million people, in a sense.
That's the balance you have to strike, right? I need to stick up for my district. I have to do what's right for my district. Those are the people who sent me there. But I can't ignore the fact that we're all in this together.
That should do it. Did you know that George Washington had one of these, and he used to take pieces of nutmeg to parties?
Really?
And he would do that into
Boy, he
his
was
food.
fun, huh?
Because he really was. Because it was so expensive, he didn't think his hosts could afford it.
Really?
Habanera. An archaeological dig in Peru found an 8,500-year-old habanera. What I learned here is the heat comes from the seeds and the little white membranes, and it is ferocious. The last ingredient, Senator, is a half a pound of fresh mozzarella.
Looks good.
Look, if you can't get fresh mozzarella, don't get that stuff you get in the supermarket. Just don't cook this dish. This is a serious matter to those of us who live in Hoboken.
You refer to New Jersey politics in PolitiFacts often as this thing of ours. Explain what you mean
Well,
by
it's
that.
a riff on The Godfather. Cosa Nostra means this thing of ours. It is something that is reserved for the initiate. It is not open to outsiders. I just adopted the name but translated it.
I like it.
How can you not love the follies of what the people we cover do? I mean, they can't get along when they're of opposite parties. They can't get along when they're the same party. They insist on fighting no matter what. What year did you come to New Jersey?
1978. Came from Rolling Stone, where I got fired, to New Jersey Monthly to be the editor. The guy who called me up, he said, would you be interested in being the editor? And I thought, New Jersey, gritty, interesting, tough. I thought, if it were Connecticut magazine, no. But New Jersey, sure.
You keep talking about civility in politics.
That's the one that's closest to my heart. So in 2003, when I got in the legislature, I put a resolution in that said people should be nicer to each other in New Jersey. I got laughed out of the State House. International newspapers and media said, John Bramnick wants to legislate civility, put you in jail if you're not nice. Well, I have to tell you, if I look back 16 or 17 years, I was ahead of the curve on that one. Because
some people should be in jail.
And I blame some of the cable, MSNBC and Fox. I don't like either of them. Why? They never say one thing good about the other side. So to me, that's really bad for democracy. It's bad for America. How do you not treat people with respect? I don't get it.
What at the age of 26 prompted you to run for public office?
Nick, being born and raised in Orange, they'd have about 25 people who would run for 5 commissioner seats. And you didn't run for mayor, you got to look at by your other fellow commissioners.
Right.
So some guys came along and said, hey, here's kids, take down so-and-so signs, here's $20. So we kept taking money from all of them, essentially, on those. So eventually I said, listen, why don't we have a vote, okay, of the 7 of us, and we'll vote for 5 people, and we'll keep their signs up. And that was my introduction to politics. And then I ran for a county committee.
You could very easily have grown up where I grew up in Hudson County. That's what we used to do, is pay kids to take the signs down. What's your least favorite thing about the job?
The moments where you feel like you can't convince people of something that you see as completely logical. And so you see a problem, and you say, okay, I know how to fix this.
I think I see Steve Sweeney and Vinny Prieto
right?
here.
You know how to fix this, and people allow politics to get in there. And sometimes we'll even admit to you, like, well, I know that makes sense, but the politics don't work, so I'm not doing it. That's the worst part of the job, because when you know you can figure out a way to solve a problem for somebody, and it's right there, and you can't do it because the politics, gets frustrating. But I knew what I was buying when I ran for this job.
Did you go into this with your eyes open? There have to have been surprises.
Oh, there's surprises every day. But I mean, in general, you know that politics in New Jersey is a tough business.
After the election, you sued Christy Whitman's campaign manager.
No, I sued to overturn the election. But Whitman was going to Florio, you got to control Lesniak. And he says, control Lesniak? Can anybody control Lesniak?
No, that's not. That never has happened.
No.
Governor Whitman goes to Washington. You find yourself now both Senate president and acting governor. I coined the phrase SPAG.
Right.
As SPAG, Senate President, Acting Governor. It's the most powerful governorship there could possibly be.
I mean, I would open the sessions up, but then I kind of leave, They didn't want me to, the Democrats really didn't want me to preside because they thought it was just too much. It was a lot easier than Christy Whitman had.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, you could have legislative leadership meetings shaving in the morning.
Right.
It was a knockdown, drag out. The incumbent mayor whom you ran against, Sharp James, accused you of everything.
Every imaginable thing
You were an instrument of the international Jewish conspiracy. You were taking money from the KKK and the Taliban.
Yes, I mean,
and you weren't black enough.
If you can,
you can't make this up.
Yes, you can bring all that together. You're a unifier.
We had a symposium. We said, what would make up a clean campaign? And we came up with clean campaign principles, and I said, I'll sign it. And Jim McGreevey signed it. I mean, we had a clean campaign.
Yes.
And the nice thing about it was that after that campaign, people said that they felt they had learned more during that campaign than others. They appreciated substance, and that's why I think we do much better to get back to substance these days.
Wouldn't we? Was your mother a cook?
Polish cook,
Polish cook.
of course. So I had my gułąbki and kibasi and sauerkraut.
Well, and pierogi's nothing
And
but pasta.
pierogi,
It's
of
nothing but
course.
pasta,
That's
you know,
true.
moved north, yeah. What did your grandmother cook?
The only thing I remember is meatloaf and pot roast. It wasn't like the best food in the world. You know what I mean? I do have to say, I went to summer camp and I came home and I said, I had great food at summer camp. It's true.
I'm an Irishman, so
Yeah.
I was smart enough to marry an Italian.
Social climbing.
Lucky enough to be born Irish. So cooking for an Irish family is a little different than cooking for an Italian family. You know that.
Yeah,
right?
well, my best friend growing up was Irish. We would eat dinner at his house early just to fill up and then go to my mother's house for the good stuff. Was your mom a cook?
No, she was not. She was not. And my wife.
Is your wife a cook?
Now, listen to that. Her father was a butcher who was a great cook. Now, you would think she's great. Forget about it.
Oh, you're going to get away with saying this on the air?
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And at Christmas time, we hide our presents in the oven. I mean, she never looks in there.
Wow.
Believe me.
I hope she's not going to be too annoyed with you.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, this is my favorite thing, is the blanching of the asparagus. It's one of my favorite. I'm a big blancher.
You're a blancher?
Yeah, it stops the cooking, keeps it nice and green.
How did you get into this business?
The music business? Yeah. Oh, I was born into it. If my father had been a plumber, we'd be talking about pipe fittings right now. My father and my father's uncles, well, they all grew up in Paterson, New Jersey. After dinner at Aunt Honey's house on Sunday, they would all gather in the living room. And Bobby and Pete Dominic played banjo, and my dad would play guitar. And they taught me, I got banjo lessons when I was 6.
Is that a lead into playing guitar?
It was for me, because you get all the wrist skills and you get to play these great chord solos, and they would make me sound good. So if I was just going dun 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 dun, they'd be going they'd be making all sorts of rhythm behind me. I always felt like $1,000,000. One of my papers at Don Bosco was about Benny Goodman being the king. It was truly the king of swing, and I got a B on it, and then my mother showed it to him. He said, "Only a B." I said, "And I'm the king of swing."
It is not usual for musicians to have political stories, but you've got one of the great political stories of all time. You recorded a song 35 years ago, called "I Like Jersey Best." Mm-hmm. I first heard it, you and Bucky playing it in a dive bar in the West 30s of Manhattan.
There was a guy in Plainfield, New Jersey named Ben Maggio, who was a teacher there. And he loved the song, and he found a guy who was going to sponsor a bill to make it the official state jingle.
State jingle.
So, because they figured the song should be very, like a march.
Should be great.
But as a jingle, what the hell? We get, and we're driving down Route 1, and we get there, and I say to my father, we can park right over there for $3. And he's like, oh, I'm going to find a space. And we parked in Metuchen,
Yeah,
so,
right.
So,
and walked carrying the guitar.
Carried everything in. I remember Alan Karcher was the speaker. Yeah. And I remember getting up there, and I didn't have at that time a strap to hold the guitar, so I had to rest the guitar on the dais there. I was dais like it's a Dean Martin roast. So I started singing the song, and I remember Alan rapped the gavel down, like, make everybody be quiet. I thought I'd been shot, so.
That's what it sounds like.
And I finished the song, and everybody stood up and applauded. Actually, the funny part was the guy who sponsored the bill introduced my father in the balcony as Rocky Pizzarelli.
Rocky.
It's a great moment. My father, gave one of those. But it passed in the assembly. So it was a big deal. Oh, we passed the assembly, and then he said, in January, we'll see what happens. And it died on the Senate floor in January. Evidently, they had other things to do.
Well, there's background to this. There were contestants for a state song.
Yeah.
But there was a guy named Red Mascara.
Yes, I know Red Mascara.
You know Red?
Yes.
And Red wrote a song called "I'm from New Jersey." He went down there every year and pitched it for 40 years as the state song, and it just never got anywhere, and they couldn't do your jingle
Right.
without a state song.
The Pinelands and the Vinelands, Seaside Heights, Margate. You can have Miami. I love the Garden State. I've been a lot of places, seen pictures of the rest. But of all the places I can think of, I like Jersey best. Well, our famous parkway, it's the dark way home from Manasquan. You think for all those quarters, they turn the road lights on. And have no pity, Jersey City once again will shine. With Homedale, Cape May, Hasbrook Heights, I like our state just fine. The Pinelands and the Vinelands, Seaside Heights, Margate. You can have Miami. I love the Garden State. I've been a lot of places, seen pictures of the rest. But of all the places I can think of, I like Jersey best. Ba-ba-da-ba-da.
When the moon hits the sky, come on.
Like a big pizza pie,
it's amore.
Very good.
That's good.
I do Sinatra.
I knew
don't
we
do
could get-
Dean Martin.
Come on, what's your favorite Sinatra song?
Fly with me.
Come fly with me.
Let's
Come fly
float down to Peru. In Llama Land, there's a one-man band, and he'll toot his flute for you. We're using sweet sausage.
I'm sure anything cooked by you, Nick, is sweet.
Ah, very good. Very good.
You want a kid from Orange using it?
Well, let's see how you do. Give me about 2 inches. No! Whoa, you're dangerous. We're going to cut this into florets like that.
I'm going to keep my fingers away from that.
I know a good personal injury lawyer.
Smells good.
Yeah. And now what we're going to do is cook this for 5 hours. We're going to let this simmer for 5 hours.
Okay.
And by the miracle of television, we'll only take about 3 minutes. Now, by the miracle of television, our 5 hours have elapsed, and we have the makings of a beautiful sauce here. That's very nice. This is my favorite part of cooking. Take all your aggressions out.
Good. Maybe I have more aggression than I realized. Yes. I want to turn the tables on you a little bit. You ask all your guests on Pasta and Politics certain personal questions. I want to ask some of them of you. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing?
I'd be teaching Shakespeare at the University of Montana. God help me. If you hadn't been in politics, what would you be doing?
Probably be making bow ties.
I wish I had been a basketball coach.
Oh, well, of course. Yeah.
You know, like that would be something.
course.
Oh, why didn't I do that?
I never wanted to play for the Yankees. I knew I wasn't good enough, but I could have been the third base coach.
Right,
I could have done that. Twice, I believe, I subbed for you on Reporters Roundtable.
Yeah.
And this is not an easy job. I came in, of course, with a list this long of topics. And when I got through my list, I looked at the clock. We had 12 minutes to go. It's not an easy job.
Thank you for recognizing that.
I think it was while you were chairman, you and I did a television show together before this one. Do you remember?
Of course I
on,
do.
On Tour of New Jersey?
Of course I do. I would have guests, people from the cabinet, interesting people from the political community.
How do we sum up New Jersey Election Day 1999?
A lot of money got spent and very little happened. This is 25 to 30% of people who are going to vote in every election, and they know, what they want. But that leaves you with 70% of the electorate to whom the legislature is by and large anonymous. I don't know how you guys like you fix that.
And so that's right. Before you interviewed me, I interviewed you.
What got you the most criticism from the press? What was the thing you did that made them come after you?
I didn't come after me. I raised taxes.
Raised taxes. Well, everybody, okay.
I raised, I tell legislators this, we can't ever touch a tax. I raised the income tax.
Mm-hmm.
I raised the sales tax. I voted for a gas tax hike. I tried to raise the gas tax. And I got elected by the largest margin in state history.
There you go.
After that.
It was 1995. It was announced that Bill Clinton was going to kick off his re-election fundraising in New Jersey. Mr. President, I want you to meet Michael Aaron. He's our premier political reporter on television in the state.
This is all on tape.
On tape.
Okay.
And he starts to walk away. And I said, one more, Mr. President. And he turns around and I say, even people who agree with you on those
and like what you're doing think that you change your positions too much, too easily.
I disagree with that.
And he looked at me, and his eyes bugged, and his face reddened.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that.
I disagree with that.
And he got right in your face.
Right in my face. That is pure press propaganda from people like you.
I think that is press propaganda from people like you.
Name me a president who took on the NRA while in office.
Who else ever tried to raise taxes as president to balance the budget? Name me one. You can't.
You can't. That's just pure press propaganda.
With all due respect, people do say that.
Well, if you tell them that enough, they might.
Well, sure they say that if you keep telling it to them.
Why is it always our fault? Why?
We're the messenger.
We're the messenger. Kill the messenger.
Kill the messenger.
How's the media changed?
It's changed so greatly. Everybody was so careful about being nonpartisan and so careful about making sure that we treated both sides equally, or all sides, because often there's more than two sides.
Sure.
I found my philosophy background really helped because I could take an issue and hold it up and see many facets. And it really, it was great. And then things started to change, and I saw people taking a stand.
Now it's tribal. You turn on the station that belongs to the tribe that you belong to.
It amazes me that people don't understand how that undermines us as a country, as a people.
You talk to people apparently constantly about
That's what I do.
politics.
People ask me what I do for a living. I say I go out to lunch.
And you work the phones, but you don't carry a cell phone.
No, I run a weekly. There are no breaking stories. You want to talk to me, you leave a message on the landline, I'll get back to you. I get back to everybody. Because you can't.
The whole world has passed you by,
they
man.
passed me by.
We can make history right now, do the first ever
Snapchat
on Boston Politics. And I just want to say right now, and you can follow me, but Nick Acachella, so you can see yourself there. And this is us making food. And it's a vegan meal, which makes me very excited. And there are the cameras behind us.
Garlic.
Lots of garlic.
Always lots of garlic. You start every recipe in Italy with browning garlic, and then you decide what you're going to cook.
Okay.
Now, you asked me to do this with half sweet sausage and half hot sausage.
Yes.
Why?
A, it's the recipe, so always follow the recipe.
Okay.
And B, it's worth. You get a little surprise, right? You're not sure which one you're getting.
Yes, indeed. Here come your pickled peppers that your godmother did not have in the recipe.
Yeah, she's gonna yell at me because she's gonna look at this and say I did everything that I should have done. She's gonna yell at me for this one. Sorry, Godma. Sorry.
The only thing left to do is toss the sauce with the spaghetti.
That's great.
And eccola. That means, look at that.
Eccola. If you were allowed one do-over in your career, what would it be?
I probably would have started PolitiFacts a lot sooner. A lot sooner.
Why?
Just because I'm having so much fun. And I've reached the point where I can call up anybody and say, I'd really like to talk to you, completely off the record. I never quote anybody.
No?
Unless they insist. No, unless they insist. And then I try to talk them out of it. Because it makes me look smarter that I came up with this. So, yeah. You were noted for what you called the politics of inclusion. Can you explain what you meant by that?
It's about everybody. And everybody, and what your beliefs are, you can be right wing, left wing. If you really want to do what's best for the state, often you can compromise around something and get it done. It doesn't matter if you're black or you're white or you're Italian or you're Irish. We all should come together.
That's another thing that's
politics
gone away.
ought to really be about everybody, and everybody ought to have a place in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think politics these days, they practice what I call a politics of division, because they
Yeah, I think
find
that's
ways
true.
to separate one person from another in order to get their vote.
People will play to the left or right. So the extremists control both the country and the state. If you had the more competitive districts, people who ran for office would have to be more moderate and more in the middle and more of a problem solver.
You're hard to nail down. you manage to view each issue separately and come out on the side where you think is right, regardless of whether those people are traditional allies of your partner, of your party. I kind of like.
Thank you for saying that. I think they're good people in both political parties, and always thought that it's better to try to reach across party lines and work constructively.
We did auto insurance reform. I was able to get that through with Joe Doria helping. I did a lot of work with the Democrats, and that worked.
Well, Doria was always a very bipartisan, accommodating.
Yeah, he wanted to get things done. The old days, that's what we used to do.
What went wrong?
If you don't vote in a primary, the people who do vote are the most partisan, and they tend to be the more extreme, and then you don't like your choices. And when you don't like your choices, people say, oh, I'm not going to vote because I don't like my choices. And so it just perpetuates itself, but it starts at that primary level.
I think part of the problem is the fringe of both parties is incredibly, incredibly dangerous to our system.
But we do that with safe districts.
Which is a mistake.
The safer the district, the more likely the extremes are going to take over.
I think you should have as many competitive districts as possible.
I've been saying that for
Let
years.
them go back and see their voters in a competitive manner. If you're sitting from your perch and you're getting 75% of the vote, and you don't have to answer anybody, it becomes
I
easy.
used to have a friend in Texas who claimed he never trusted anybody who got more than 55% of the vote because something wrong.
Absolutely.
Something wrong if you're getting more than 55%. A couple of decades ago, I should say, I offered my services as the tiebreaker. And the then Democratic Speaker of the Assembly, Joe Roberts, looked at me as if I were absolutely insane. I said to him, it's very, very simple. The side that comes back with the most competitive districts wins. And he looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I mean, because they don't want that. If you had one do-over in your political career, if one thing that you could take back or do a different way, what would it be?
Well, it was my original vote on marriage equality, Nick. And I took into a political calculation, and I told everybody, I said, I'll be one of 21 votes, but I won't be one of 14. Well, you know something? I should have been one of 15. I put politics before people. And, you can't do that if you're going to do these jobs.
You come from a relatively conservative branch of the Democratic Party in New Jersey, so I would imagine that your constituency and the constituents surrounding you kind of agreed with that.
Yeah, but you know something, Nick? We're supposed to stand up for people. Civil rights is civil rights. When you're talking about adults that love each other, and you start to understand that, when someone's at a crisis point that they can't be there because they're not the next of kin, when that's the person they spent 20 years with.
Yeah, well, that's a real problem.
What it was a civil rights issue. And you don't back down from civil rights ever. I got into this because of my daughter.
Right.
I wanted my daughter to be treated with respect as all disabled people. Well, you can't say, well, this is good and that's bad. If it's good for one, it's good for all. And I learned a valuable lesson that day that I will never forget.
What was it like when you went into the legislature? There were fewer women.
No lines for the ladies' room.
No lines for the ladies' room.
Oh, still no lines.
It was a real good old boys club in those days. I remember.
It really was. And some of the issues that interested me still interest me. For instance, domestic violence. In fact, Loretta and I just put in a
Senator Weinberg.
Senator Weinberg and I just put in a whole slew of domestic violence bills. We worked together on a lot of things. Back then, I put in a couple of bills, and one of the men came to me and said, well, why are we worried about this? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, if there's something going on in the home, why doesn't she just leave? And of course, that isn't always an option for women who are victims of domestic violence, and he had no clue. Many of the men did have a clue, and we were able to do a lot of things. But the truth is, unless our legislatures reflect the people that we represent, it is not a true democracy, because you're not actually hearing from everybody. So that's why we need 52% women, because we are 52%.
Are 52 women 52% of the population? The old number 51 has gone by.
It's 52.
You were reelected in 1985, and the exact opposite kind of election from the first one. I think you carried all but 3 municipalities in the state.
It's the largest victory of anybody in the history of the state. I carried 60% of the African-American vote.
Did you?
And no Republican before or since in recent history has done that in any state.
Nobody's come close.
And no, I was very proud of that and proud of the African-Americans, frankly, around the state who supported me. I mean, Coretta Scott Ken came in and campaigned for me.
Did she really?
Actually, Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, called and said, Coretta, he's a Republican. You really shouldn't be doing that. And she said, I told him Martin would have. And then he shut up.
That's nice. That's nice.
Bob and I are this amazing partnership. Of all the senators down in Washington, I've learned the most from him. First time that two minorities from the continental United States have been sent to Washington, D.C. The beautiful thing about our state, nobody really cares.
Nobody notices.
Nobody notices.
Right.
That says a lot about Jersey. It wasn't a campaign issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm the fourth African American ever to be elected to the United States Senate ever. But the beautiful thing about our state is we are such a diverse state. We don't care whether a senator's black or white or Latino, you name it. We just want you to do right by Jersey.
I used to compare what we do to following sports. It's similar to following sports, except the result counts.
That's a good point. The result, it does have real life consequences.
Right.
It does, yeah. Elections matter. Elections have consequences.
I always say the better you know someone, the less likely you're going to do a press conference against them.
Isn't that in keeping with your argument for civility?
And one of the problems with governors, they don't seem to get together with the legislature very often.
How about this? You start with the first district, and you have Thursday nights at Drumthwacket. And you just invite the 3 members from the first district, and it'll take you a year to get through 40 districts. Then you start over again. You break bread, it's harder to say no.
Of course.
And we haven't learned that lesson. We haven't learned that.
You know, Speaker Boehner is someone who I served with in the House, a good guy. You can normally strike a deal with him, except that this Tea Party universe that is all in his caucus and is a significant enough number creates a challenge for him because this minority says, oh no, it's only what the majority of the majority agrees to. Well, the majority of the majority is a minority of the House of Representatives, if you think about it. So it used to be Democrats and Republicans having different views and having their battles, but generally finding ways for common ground. And you'd go out and have a beer later after with the person who you were debating on the floor. That's changed a lot. Part of it is the drive to get everybody back to their district to see their constituency. So there's no interrelationship anymore the way there used to be.
We've always been kind of complacent and said, well, there's this pendulum swing and it'll go to the right and then it'll go to the left, but it always usually ends up pretty close to the center. And that was okay when the right was here and the left was here, but now the right's way out there and the left's way out there, and there's no way to get back to anything like the center, and we really are a centrist country. And I actually place a lot of this blame on Newt Gingrich. And when he came in, he was the one who first said to the incoming classes, don't move your families here.
Right.
You know, that was a mistake because it's hard to hate somebody that you're sitting next to at your kid's
And your children
performance
go to school with, right.
or an athletic event.
Yep.
And then you start to talk. These men and women don't know each other.
They
come in on Monday night or
weekend.
Tuesday morning and leave on Thursday. I'm glad they can do all the business of the country in 3 days. I mean, that's great. 3 days a week. It's not a bad gig to have.
There's too much not having opponents but having enemies.
Right.
And that's very dangerous.
Well, you want to
It's
know one of
very
my
dangerous.
lowest moments
Yes.
last year? I was sitting at home in Newark watching TV, and I was watching a Republican debate where Chris Christie was being savaged by his opponents for hugging Barack Obama.
Right.
And by the way, I'm a hugger. That wasn't even a good hug. But it was after Superstorm Sandy.
Yes.
And by the way, we've so demonized each other that even human contact, we got to work
Better
together.
work together.
Yeah,
It's
so
not
I'm
doing us any good.
And as soon as I start holding it personal, then it hurts the people. Remember, the Declaration of Independence, the end of this document about independence. Everybody says independence, independence. No. It's not only about that. Look at the end. That last sentence is also a declaration of interdependence. They said at that last sentence, we mutually pledge to each other. In order to make all of this work, we must mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And that, to me, is what's the greatness of our nation, is our common commitment to our ideals and our willingness to show that humanity is at its best when we work in coordination, find the common ground, and pursue the common good.
It used to be you'd have to vote together, spend some time together, research things, drive together. You'd have an entire legislative delegation driving down in the same car.
No more.
You use it because everybody's so busy outside the legislative process.
I always say that the legislature now is 120 cars driving in 40 directions. There seems to be no human interaction. All the old timers talk about the days when they would fight on the floor and then go over to Lorenzo's and have dinner and settle all the problems.
You know, the goal is this. You run elections. Like in any profession, you run to win. You work hard. You play above board. You work hard. But then when you get elected, Your job is to serve with the people who are there with you.
Next few years, I think we have an opportunity to show that Democrats and Republicans in the state can work together. There are some fantastic Republican senators. There's some fantastic Democratic senators. We got to find where we can agree. One of the first things I did, Nick, when I got elected to the Senate, I went and met with a lot of my colleagues all around the state, regardless of political party, and I didn't ask them about their views on issues. I want to learn who they were as a person. So I think once we get back down to that fundamental belief of human beings and how we connect versus what our views are on issues, I think that's how we're going to start working together. And that's what Washington needs to do also.
Well, particularly on the state level, you have to stop worrying about what your views are on national issues and deal with the problems of the state. God, I wish you luck with that, but I see the divide getting bigger, and it kind of scares me.
And I think that's at the fault of those political wings on both sides.
I agree. They may only be a minority of each party, but boy, they make a lot of noise, both sides.
We can disagree, but we should disagree with respect, and that's what we're missing.
We are missing that. Let's test and see if this meets your teeth correctly, which was what al dente means.
From the very first episode and 5 seasons on, Nick continued to share his recipe for fixing politics, to return to a more civil political landscape with opponents, not enemies. You start by bringing politicians back to the dinner table.
I want to share some of what we have cooked here together.
Good. I'd be pretty mad if you didn't. After all this. Well, you asked me before what the difference in the legislature. We used to have dinner every night on the way home. And it didn't matter what party you were in. You joined the big table and you talked.
Also, from what I've been told of those days, you could yell at each other on the floor, and then over dinner.
Oh yeah,
that's when
absolutely we were all friends, and it stayed that way. The most strenuous legislature I was ever in, the most difficult was the income tax, because that was the toughest issue facing any legislator, whether to establish a state income tax, and people felt so strongly about it. We became good friends in the process. We still get together once or twice a year.
Do you really?
Yes, we get together in New Brunswick once every couple of years, and we break bread together. And we talk about old times.
It works.
Because we're good friends. It works. It works. And that's the way it should be. That's the way politics should be. It works better that way.
Hey, look, I come from a culture where when you break bread, it's very hard to say no to people. Our meatball lasagna.
Bon appetit.
Bon appetit, yes. How do you say that in Polish?
Smacznego.
I'm sure there's a lot of little things I should have worked
I tell everybody in the business, break bread with people.
No, there's something you can't tell.
Because it makes it more difficult to be obstreperous. It works. Well, we talked about a lot of things. You've enlightened me, you've entertained me. But my Aunt Josephine, when people talk a lot, she has a saying. When there's food on the table, in Italian, it's mangia e stata zit, which means let's shut up and eat.
Good knife skills. I'm pretty good. I'm not a cook, but I play one on TV.
I've heard. I've got you all off kilter because we sang on tape, and you know they're going to use that tape.
Maybe the whole time.
Maybe.
New Jersey never lets you down. I said it to somebody, it clicked.
I've quoted it innumerable times. I think it should replace liberty and prosperity on the state crest because it summarizes everything we do.
Funding provided by PSE&G, committed to providing safe, reliable energy, now and in the future. NJM Insurance Group, serving the insurance needs of residences and businesses for more than 100 years. And by Fairview Insurance Agency, family operated for over 50 years, with locations in Verona and Cherry Hill.